Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for watching this MRH presentation of African American Education History in Hadley Township. It is unfortunate, to be sure, that Maplewood Richmond Heights is unable to present its annual Black History Month dinner this time around. We know you'll understand why, but that doesn't mean we can't celebrate our district's rich history in a virtual setting and maybe even learn something surprising along the way from the people who have lived that history. So let's introduce our participants here. I am Ed Rich. I'm the Director of Communications for the school district. We have Carmen Pace McFerrin. Carmen, 1976 is your graduation year, is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
it is.
She works for the city of Richmond Heights. She is a longtime supporter of the MRH and its Hall of Fame program. We appreciate her being here. Jo Ellen McDonald is with the Richmond Heights Historical Society. There's nothing she doesn't know about the rich history of this area. Mary Lynn Sims joins us. She attended New Lincoln School. If you haven't heard of it, you're going to shortly. Ernestine Langston Gage is a 1971 graduate who attended the original Lincoln School and New Lincoln as well. Again, we'll get more into that shortly. And we may be joined by Charles H., who will be in Wisconsin if he's able to make it, and he was a classmate of Ms. Sims. So thanks again, everybody. Let's start with Ms. McDonald with the Historical Society. Would you walk us through the history of African American education in Hadley Township as it appears on the timeline marker that's located on the front yard of Richmond Terrace, which I'm about to pull up on the screen here right now?
Yes, I'm happy to give some of the history here. This plaque, as you've already stated, is at street level in front of Richmond Terrace on Laclede Station Road. And if you've not gone to see it and read it, I would highly recommend that you do. Mary Lynn Sims and I were part of a group of people who worked together to produce the plaque and to have a dedication ceremony, and we're very proud of our efforts. In order to understand why there was first a Lincoln School and later a New Lincoln School, you have to understand segregation. At the bottom of that plaque is a timeline that takes us through in more detail some of the history I'm going to talk about. Both at the national and at the state levels, separate schools for white and Black students were mandated. This is what segregation in education was all about. In the early 1900s, Missouri law provided that African American parents could petition their local school board, in this case it would have been the Maplewood School District, to provide a separate school if there were 8 children living in the district who wanted to go to school. Prior to 1909, when this petition was submitted and honored, kids who wanted to go to school had to go to Clayton and attend a elementary school that was called the Crispus Attucks School for Colored Children. The Lincoln School opened right after this petition was successful on the part of the parents in a building on Dale Avenue that no longer exists, that was actually a church. And grades 1 through 8 were educated in that school. And initially there were 2 teachers. I also need to explain a little bit before we go into the timeline that segregation also applied to where Black people could live. Other than a small number of Black families living in the Maplewood area and some in North Webster Groves, in the early 1900s and for many years thereafter, Black people could only live in designated areas. Some examples would be the Ville in the city of St. Louis, Meacham Park in Kirkwood, Kinloch in Berkeley, and a few others. What changed here in our community is that in the very early 1900s, a company called Evans Howard Brickworks wanted to set up a factory and create fire brick and also brick for housing. Their problem was that they needed a fairly large workforce, and at that time there was no transportation by bus or any other method other than your own to get from the city of St. Louis out to where they wanted to locate their facility, which at that time became the Brentwood Industrial Court. It still exists under that name, but you have to stretch your imagination to picture it. So what they did is go to St. Louis County and get permission to build housing so that they could move families so that they could have a workforce that was available to make these bricks. It's important to understand only a company that had a lot of political clout would have been able to pull that off. So it's a very unique history. It began in Brentwood and moved east to Richmond Heights, and both communities were pretty closely connected. Because of the housing they put up, I'm going to show you an example. I'm going to do a plug for our history book. It's called Richmond Heights, 1868 to 1940. But in the book, we're going to have to stretch your imagination. This is a picture of the type of housing that Evans Howard put up. It was called a 2x2, and there were 2 houses with a common wall, 2 rooms in each place. They were set up on stilts. There was no plumbing, no electricity, and certainly no central heating. They had a wood burning stove that was in like the kitchen area. Not having plumbing and electricity in the early 1900s wasn't terribly unique, but I want you to get the idea that these were very basic housing units. The people who lived there could live there rent-free as long as one person in the family worked for Evans Howard. So what it did is it gave Brentwood and Richmond Heights the opportunity to have Black communities that were pretty unique to the history of St. Louis County. Because there was no transportation other than by horse or walking or a wagon in the early 1900s, the people who lived here were very self-sufficient. You know, they had their own gardens, they had community gardens, they raised chickens, cows, goats, horses, obviously, to pull the wagons. So this is the kind of community where the first Lincoln School began. Going through the timeline very briefly, 1909, Lincoln School was established in the rented church on Dale Avenue, grades 1 through 8. By 1916, because the district was growing, the school district bought property on Dale Avenue and built a 2-room school. By the 1920s, there were a lot of people moving into Richmond Heights, Maplewood, and Brentwood. And so the school needed to be increased in size. There were a series of bond issues in the 20s, and what happened was the 2 more rooms were added on to Lincoln School, and then a little later, a basement playroom, and finally a restroom. By 1933, new Lincoln School opened on Thomas Place, which is where the Richmond Terrace facility is right now. In 33, grades 5 through 8 went to school in New Lincoln School, and Old Lincoln was used for grades 1 through 4. Throughout the years that we're talking about, up until 1954, anybody who wanted to go to high school, according to Missouri law, if they lived in the Maplewood School District, they could go to Sumner High School in the city, and the district was obliged to pay tuition and provide transportation, or they could go to Douglas High School in North Webster Groves, and their tuition was paid by the district, but they had to find their own way to get there. The big change came in 1954 when the Supreme Court heard the case Brown versus the Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. And in that court hearing, they held that it was unconstitutional to have separate schools for Black students. That changed everything nationally, but of course the rollout in individual communities took some time. Maplewood, Richmond Heights by then, ended up integrating their high school in 1955. So that happened very quickly. But, and in 55, the old Lincoln School closed, but the new Lincoln School continued for grade school until 1962. So that is the history, and I'm going to turn things over to the people who have personal experience.
Thank you. That was amazing, Ms. McDonald. I appreciate that. Ernestine Langston Gage, you have the distinction of having attended the original and the new Lincoln School. share some favorite memories. What do you recall about that time and that place?
Well, first of all, I would like to make a correction to the record that I actually graduated from Edgewood, Richmond Heights in 1967.
67.
Yes. And what I recall at the old Lincoln School is the very first day of school. And I wrote in my book, and I still remember to this day, that I can recall kids crying and screaming and kicking because they did not want to go to kindergarten. They wanted to go home. Well, me being the youngest in my family, I wanted to go to school because I knew I would have kids to play with. So I very distinctly recall that. And then I think about, you know, how we used to line up at school to get our shots. Remember the shots that we used to get at school? I remember hearing kids just crying and screaming because they did not want to take shots. And I couldn't understand why, but now I understand it. But at that time, I didn't understand it, that it wasn't as bad as we thought it would probably be. I remember the playground and the number of kids that were just out there playing all day long. And I mean, it was a real community. It was a community of love where we looked out after one another. And not only as kids and students, but the parents in Richmond Heights certainly looked out for everyone else's kids. And it was okay with parents to discipline someone else's child, either verbally or contacting the parent before the kid got home to tell them what they had in fact done. So, and to me, those are very fond memories, because if you compare then to now, you know, that doesn't happen at all. You know, you dare not try to discipline someone else's child in this day and time. I remember at the old Lincoln School, when I got out of kindergarten, that I would have to go to Miss Dottie Brown's house. She lived right on Dale Avenue, right next to the school, but there was a street, Argus Street, in between the school and her home. And I would run to her house every day after school and stay there until my older siblings got out of school, and then they would come by and pick me up and take me home. So that was my memory of the old Lincoln School. The new Lincoln School, I remember music class with Miss Joyce Smith, teaching us every song in every genre. I remember Miss Marthenia Bates Johnson teaching art and English. And the most fond memory that I have of her was telling us as young adults that in order for us to go to junior high, we had to learn the Gettysburg Address. And I mean, we struggled, but kids would learn it. We learned it. And then when we got to junior high, we were afraid that they were going to test us and tell us that we didn't learn it properly, that we had to go back to elementary school. But, you know, those are fond memories that I have. The teachers were very caring. And I think that for a Black person, that really set our foundation very firmly, because we knew then that we had to be better than ourselves, actually. And we had to keep trying, that there was no giving up, and there was no such word as I can't, because I can't to them meant you're not willing to try. So they supported us, and they made sure that we got what we needed in order to be successful in school. Not only educationally, but if someone came to school hungry, didn't have lunch money, they would still feed us. If someone needed clothing, they would make sure that someone in the community looked out for us. If there was a family issue, they served us. They made sure that we were taken care of. So for me, Lincoln's Elementary School, both old and new, is very dear to my heart.
Would you go as far as to say that teachers in that day and that time helped you find your identity?
I would say that most definitely. They helped us find our identity, and they also didn't directly say, we're gonna deal with Black history or we're gonna learn about Black history. They infused that in us every day.
Thank you, Ms. Gage. Great. Mary Lynn Sims, class of 71, correct?
Right.
So, you know, just like we were talking with Ernestine, the public school experience provides a lot of us with memories and friendships that last a lifetime, and we're witnessing that right now on this Zoom session. Tell us about your years at Lincoln and what people and events stand out for you.
Well, Lincoln was really an extension of the community. of Richmond Heights and Maplewood. And I just would like to say that my father was born in Richmond Heights, 1924. He attended the old Lincoln School. And my mother was educator with special school districts. So the community was embedded Lincoln School, and everyone was a part of Lincoln. The principal at the time was Mr. A.B. Green. Yes. And Mrs. Etna Taylor was secretary. Mrs. Douglas was our kindergarten teacher. And like Ernestine said, kindergarten was a half a day. So after school, my grandmother would keep my brother and I. So first grade was Mrs. Strode. We had Mrs. Brown, who lived in the community, and she lived on Dale. We had Mrs. Stinson, who lived in the city, but her children attended the Maplewood schools. Her oldest daughter attended schools since she was part of the community, the school community. And we had just merit of Mrs. Douglas also was our physical education teacher. We would have different events, annual events, which brought the community together. And we would have concerts. We would just involve the community in everything. And if you got in trouble, you would get reprimanded at school and also at home. And any neighbor could talk with you, talk with your parents. It was just a loving community, and school was just an extension of that. They made sure that we learned, and we learned in a loving environment. So we were just very, very fortunate. And I don't think that actually Lincoln was any different from any other community, any other African American community, because at that time, the teachers really cared for the children, and they had communications with the parents. So it wasn't you were just sent home and no one knew what happened. There was constant communication with the parents, and the parents would have regular meetings with the school staff. So, and again, since my mother was a teacher, there was, you know, the communication was twice as much. So Lincoln was just, it was just a great place where you also learned, but you also felt safe and you felt loved. So school was just, it was an extension of the community, as well as the church was an extension of the community, where everyone would help one another, look out for one another. And one of my best friends still to this day is Pearlie Hobson Anderson. And we became friends in maybe second grade. And, you know, you just made friends for a lifetime. So, and the teachers, I remember we recognized the teachers several years ago because of the impact that they had on us as children and as adults. And I went to Lincoln from grades kindergarten through grade 5 because at the time we lived on the west side of Laclede Station Road. And then in 1963, my father built our last home in 1963, and I lived on the east side of Laclede Station Road. So I had to go to West Richmond School, which was really, we were in between West Richmond School and Lincoln School. But if you lived on the east side of Laclede Station Road, you had to go to West Richmond School. And then the following year in '64, they closed Old Lincoln, and the students from Lincoln integrated with the students at West Richmond School. But Lincoln was, it's just embedded in our psyche that you just had a good, solid foundation, education-wise and community-wise.
I think you've described the perfect definition of the term community in what you're describing. Students of school age today probably know the name A.B. Green, but don't know who A.B. Green is. They know there's a park a little bit north of here called A.B. Green Park. What should kids today know about the legendary A.B. Green?
He took education seriously, and he made sure that the students learned. He was very strict about following rules and ensuring that before you were promoted from one grade to another, you understood and knew the foundation and the principles for that particular course at that grade level before you were promoted. If not, he would ensure that the teachers worked with you so that you would have that foundation to be promoted. And he too was a part of the community because they eventually moved on St. Albans. So he was an integral part of the community as a resident and at the school. But he wanted to ensure that the students at Lincoln, the African-American students at Lincoln, were just as good or better than the students at the other schools in the Maplewood Richmond Heights area.
And if I might interject, he also had no tolerance for foolishness.
Right.
I recall him walking the halls, and I learned this one word from him. He would say all the time, "I will not tolerate that." And I wondered, what does tolerate mean? And then I finally looked it up, and I have used it ever since. But he had no tolerance for foolishness.
And that was when students, if the boys got out of hand, he had a paddle, and he would not fail to use it because he ran a tight ship, and he was not short when it came to disciplining the children.
I guess he would be the Mr. Clark in Lean on Me in
Right.
our day. Mr. Clark.
Right, Joe Clark, right?
Joe Clark.
Add
yeah.
another thing on A.B. Green, or a couple of things. Part of the timeline that's created on the plaque, he had written a very comprehensive history of the Lincoln schools, and that was one of the sources that I used for putting that together. So I thank him very much for that. And also one thing I mentioned, or I think Mary Lynn mentioned, West Richmond. West Richmond School is the school that became A.B. Green when they changed the name.
All right, speaking of West Richmond, Carmen Pace McFerrin, class of 76. I believe your class was the first to start at West Richmond, or A.B. Green, after the court ruling on integration. Am I accurate?
Yes, our class was the first class to start kindergarten there,
Right.
which was really huge. So we were there with many friends, and I, like Marilyn Sims mentioned too, the Hobson family, that your Pearl's sister, Kathy Hobson Caldwell, is one of my good friends from forever, so you do meet people way back, it seems like now, but your kindergarten friends, she's still one of my best friends, to this age. I did want to mention real quick though, when you talked about A.B. Green, I used to live in A.B. Green's house, okay, a few years ago. And when we first moved in, we were looking through, we found plans of the house when they had a building, things like that, where they did additions and all. And I happened to find a paddle It was a paddle that Miss Reed had made, and it had the, the holes in it. They put the holes in it so you could get that whop in there real good. And it was just so funny because it brought back so much history to me and so many memories. Thank God he never had to use it on me, but he was serious about that. And you were so right. He didn't tolerate any foolishness whatsoever, Miss Gage. You're right. But that was just a fun thing to find. And ended up, my daughter and I donated it to the school district so they would have it. I said, a lot of people won't have those memories, but we did. So those go on. But yes, we did. So our class did start kindergarten. And I believe it was either 63 or 64 at West Richmond, it's called then. Mrs. Jolly was our teacher. We had some of the same teachers that had come from over at Lincoln as well, like Mrs. Strode, I remember her, Mrs. Stinson, and Mrs. Brown was there, who Mrs. Brown also lived in the community. So if you did anything wrong at school before you got home, your mother already got that phone call. So
yeah,
she get on you. Then when we got home, we get it too. Okay. And you never wanted the teachers to call, and things. And some of the other male teachers, Coach Neville's was also, friend of my dad. They'd hang out together sometime too. And if he called you, you were in big trouble as well, So these were teachers in the community, members of the community, and friends of your family, your church members and all. So you felt very comfortable, safe with them. One thing I do remember very clearly, and Mrs. Glover also, you all remember Virginia Glover. Our school, you had to be very respectful at the school. The teachers, they wouldn't accept anything else. One of the things we always would have to do if there's trash on the floor, you didn't just drop your papers and let them go. You picked that trash up. Our custodian, Mr. Craig, kept everything neat and clean. Those floors would be polished. There weren't handprints all over the walls and things like that. They didn't allow you to do that. You walk down the hall, you don't have to touch the wall, walk in your single file line and just go on to your class or wherever you were supposed to be going, lunch or whatever it was. The cafeteria was always clean, and they respected the building just like they respected us and the community. And that's one of the things I'll never forget. You didn't hear bad language ever. They just didn't tolerate it. And our gym teacher, who was coach, would have you to do, okay, so you need to do some extra laps. You think you're acting up, and are you in trouble? That's it. The teachers would make you stay, get your work finished. You had to know what you were doing. They were so dedicated to make sure you got done what you needed to do to complete, your assignments. And you were happy to do that. You didn't want to fail at anything. And if you were, you could get some help. They would help you, not make you feel bad for asking, that type of thing. We did go to school with kids in our neighborhood, so we played with them and then went to school with them too. Did other things, went to church with them. The class, our class, most of my kindergarten classmates are still my good friends. We keep in touch. We went on to junior high together, and went on to high school, and graduated. And like I said, we still are very much in touch with each other now. We love each other. I mean, it's just, when you've known somebody since kindergarten, it's got to be something there. Okay. So try to instill that type of thing into some of our community members now, to let them know that this was a close-knit community. Everybody helped, everybody pitched in,
Yeah.
So those are the good things I remember. The class, we respected the flag. We made sure that we sang in the choirs. We have little Christmas parties, back when we could actually celebrate Christmas. And a little pageant, you'd put your little tights and little, Christmas red or green on or whatever, and sing in the choir and just have a good time. It was important, very important.
When I think about the stated mission of the Maplewood Richmond Heights School District today, developing tomorrow's citizens and scholars and stewards and leaders, it sounds to me like the foundations of that mission were in place all throughout your childhoods. Would you say that?
yes.
Yeah. I want to thank you all. This has been great, but I don't need to shut it down. Ms. Sims, go right ahead.
Okay, also, one of our teachers, I don't know if our music teacher, Mrs. Smith, is still alive. She spent time between Chicago and St. Louis with her children. But one teacher who stood out at school, and fortunately or unfortunately, I missed her because she would have been my 6th grade teacher, was Miss Virginia Glover. And she is still alive. She's in a nursing home, but she is still alive. She didn't, and actually, Miss Glover taught my father.
Mine
She
too.
taught my father. And she was the type of person born to be a teacher. And even after she retired, she was always at the African American churches, either Mount Zion, Church of God, First Baptist, and she was not just there to support any of the services or programs. She was there working. She could be found in the lower level in the kitchen area, helping to prepare foods for a funeral repast, helping to serve. She was still accurately a large part of our community, even after she retired. Richmond Heights was just in her blood. And we just need to recognize her. And I think, in addition to Miss Smith, who may or may not be alive, but Miss Glover is alive, and she just did so much for the children, the parents, and the community at large in Maplewood and Richmond Heights.
It's nice to have legendary figures like that in our lives.
And she taught at the middle school and the high school. So she was just an integral part of the education process in this area.
Do we have any final thoughts from anybody else?
Yes, I would like to highlight 2 areas that when we left elementary school and went to the middle school, Maplewood Richmond Heights Junior High, Miss Virginia Glover, Marthenia Bates Johnson, and Ira Butler, those 3 teachers that taught us all those years, were transferred to that school district with us. So they gave us an additional level of security to know that we had some of our own there with us. Also, our school and our education wasn't during the school term, just the school term. During the summers, we would have playground at New Lincoln School, and every child in the community would be up at Lincoln School, either making pot holders, playing baseball, playing dodgeball, chasing each other, whatever it took to have a good time. We were all there, still assembled every day of the summer.
Yes.
This has been a rare treat. I want to thank you all again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again in a year. What do you say?
God's willing.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks
do-
again. And thanks everybody for taking time to watch this. We really appreciate it.